In 2017, we'll be launching a new TV show called Geek Channel 8, or GC8 for short. My name is Eric Chatterjee. I'm one of the co-hosts. Although we planned to launch in 2017, at the end of 2016, a new Star Wars film will come out. And being that we are a nerd popular culture podcast, we thought it would be great to get together a roundtable and discuss what we thought of the previous Star Wars films. So we put together an episode 0 of GC8. This is it.
I'm Thomas Bishop, I'm a videographer, blogger.
Eric Chatterjee, I teach media studies.
Vincent Moore, I'm a local writer.
I'm Andrew, and I'm a just really big film buff.
So we're going to talk about various geeky subjects every week, and we thought what better to start with than Star Wars. So I don't know, you want to start down there, Andrew, with your thoughts on the Star Wars?
Yeah.
The newest, I think it was, I really personally enjoyed it. I think J.J. Abrams did a great job directing it. And I thought it lived up to the hype. I'm not sure that you guys thought it lived up to the hype.
Should we go in a line?
Yeah.
So I mean, it was a good fun film, but the second time into it, it was like, okay, this is definitely taking the magic away from Episode 4, because it borrows the same sort of storyline, and
That it does.
I thought that that it was a good film on its own, but as part of the overall Star Wars franchise, I felt it was overly derivative of the original films. But after expectations had been dashed so much by the prequels that by comparison, it looks pretty good. So I give it like a solid B. Not an A, but a B,
I preferred the prequels to The Force Awakens because I enjoyed it. It was, as Eric said, it was a good film on its own, but, Abrams wasn't really doing anything new with it. And for me, I like the story and such. And so, yeah, maybe, some of the dialogue and stuff in the prequels, which I grew up with, like those were the first ones I saw. I didn't see the originals until like afterwards, just because, the prequels were all coming out when I was, growing up and such. And so at least George Lucas did something new with the prequels compared to what J.J. Abrams did, in my opinion, was just, taking A New Hope and giving a huge fan service, which, yeah, it was nice to see some of the stuff as a Star Wars fan, but, if I go see the newest movie after all this time, I want to see something new. I want to see the plot expand, especially since they eradicated the expanded universe, which before I came up, I was a big fan of.
I think that the new Star Wars movie needs to be looked at with a bigger picture of because what's going to be happening in the next films, because that's what's really cool and why I like this one. Just like the villain here, Kylo Ren is sort of weak, but I think there's so much potential for him to grow. But then you also the female protagonist,
Rey.
Yeah, Rey. She's just learning a lot too. So I think it's really he played it maybe safe to say this time around, but could go bigger.
I want to say that I agree with Vincent on not doing anything new, and I want to give my perspective since I actually saw the original, what you now call A New Hope, but was just called Star Wars when I saw it, in the theater. So I was a child in the 70s, and I was already a science fiction fan before Star Wars came out, but science fiction movies weren't all that great. Particularly when it came to special effects. So I think Logan's Run was nominated for its special effects the year before Star Wars, and if you watch those two films back to back, it's like night and day. Also Planet of the Apes and stuff like that, which had good stories, but the effects were really cheesy. And Star Wars, when I went to see it in 1977, was the first time I'd ever seen a film and I felt like I was transported to another place. Like I could totally suspend disbelief that that place was real to me, And every place they went to was unique. So Tatooine did not look like Alderaan, did not look like the Death Star. Then in the next film, Empire Strikes Back, Dagobah didn't look like anything else. Hoth did not look like anything else that they had done before, and same with Return of the Jedi. I agree. The one thing I agree with Vincent about the prequels, which I'm not a fan of, was that they showed us new places and new cities and things like that. I felt when I walked in to see Force Awakens, there was nothing new. Everything looked like a place we had been to before.
Well, yeah, because Tatooine was essentially, what's the planet in this movie called? What is it?
Oh,
Jakku.
yeah.
Jakku is Tatooine.
Looks exactly
essentially.
like Tatooine.
Yeah.
And,
I agree
and
with that.
There was a limited number of biomes they could go to, though.
Well,
I will give them that.
But they could have, like, all they had to do was have it have purple sand, and then it would be different from Tatooine. Or, like, at least Tatooine had, like, 2 suns, you know? But they did nothing to change its look from a standard desert. And all of the planets I felt that way about in Force Awakens. I felt that every planet was a planet we had seen before, but just with a different name, you know?
Yep.
And I felt the same way about the droids. I felt the same way about everything in it. And I understand that he was surfing this wave of nostalgia where, you know, people like that things looked old-fashioned. They didn't use CGI. I think that was a good idea. They did use CGI, but they limited their use of CGI. But I felt it borrowed a lot from itself, whereas Star Wars movies always borrowed from other movies, which is what made them great. They borrowed from samurai films, and they borrowed
Well,
from
you know, Kurosawa's Seven Samurai. It took straight out from that. And if you watch Hidden Fortress, it's essentially Star Wars.
Originally, he was going to get the main actor from Seven Samurai to be Obi-Wan, but then chose Alec Guinness
Well, because
instead.
George Lucas said in the interviews on the Criterion Disc, it's very much so. It's telling the story from the lowest point possible. You know, 2 droids or 2 peasants.
yeah.
So
And also World War II films. He was a big fan of, you know, he did Red Tails not that long ago, but those dogfight films, I forget the names of.
He took it from Wings. He studied Wings.
It was
for a lot of-
one about something about a group. They were going to drop a bunker buster on a dam.
What is that
was-
film? Anyone help us out here?
It was like a propaganda reel or something, I think.
When was this released?
Oh, it was.
In World War II. So
It was like the 40s or the.
yeah.
But anyway, several of those World War II films inspired the dogfights and stuff like that. I felt that's what made Star Wars good, is that he was borrowing things that he
From
had
other
seen from other
places
movies. Whereas
that worked
the
well. Yeah.
the Force Awakens was borrowing from
It
itself.
was, but he might have been just playing a little bit safe. So I'm. What if in the next one we get all that? I mean, it picks up, but that's also what, if it picks up right at where it left off, is he going to just stay in the same?
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
planets.
it's definitely leading that way, because I mean, if this Force Awakens is A New Hope, then is Episode 8 Empire? I mean, is
I hope not.
is Rian Johnson really going to live up to that? I mean,
Well, what about the characters? I mean, like, I think all the characters are really enjoyable, and
don't get me wrong, we're on the rise. You know, females are becoming.
well, that aside,
Female heroines are becoming
completely-
the thing of today, you know. I mean, don't get me wrong, Luke essentially got a hot gender change with Daisy Ridley, but...
Well, let's talk about the characters. I do agree that female fans have been very poorly served by the Star Wars series. There haven't been very many good female characters, and with Rey, that we get a good female character, but that alone is not enough, because the character itself, I felt, was just a carbon copy of Luke. And in fact, let's face it, she's going to end up being his daughter, right? Like,
we don't
Unless they're
know,
baiting
but
us,
I
I
mean,
mean,
that would be following from like the Star Wars novels, you know, the extended universe, so to speak, which they just said, fuck that, we're not doing that anymore, you know?
Oh, I know what you mean. Yeah.
Yeah, because if you'd read the books, Han's kid, you know, essentially
Darth Sadus, I think it was.
Darth
called.
Cadus, yeah, he
Cadus,
was, you know, one of his kids, and then Ben was Luke Skywalker's kid, and then so on and so forth, and it just kind of, you can see kind of what they did if you had read any of that in this movie.
I felt that.
I never put 2 and 2. Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I never put 2 and 2 about that. Actually, I realize now. It's
I didn't know that. I know there had been books, but didn't know that they discussed all that.
Well, I
in
mean,
them.
I read the books like for the.
Is that fan fiction?
No,
It's
they're
officially
legitimate
licensed
authors.
by Lucas to do that.
I forget
wow.
who wrote the Crucible book. I had finished, but I saw it half price. The book's $1 million. And like, oh, this looks interesting. I'll pick it up, and I blasted through it in about a week and a half.
Is there fan fiction for the new film? I mean, is there Lucas?
Oh yeah,
for the new-
there's official material, like, so it's like books that aren't just novel adaptions and stuff. There's even that TV show that's out, Star Wars Rebels, that's officially canon. Is it
Well, yeah,
canon
because
or
that's canon.
Canon.
It's going to tie into Episode 8.
But did they? I'm not a fan of the extended universe. Did they throw it all out the window and say, okay, all that's no longer?
Yeah,
Yeah.
They before Episode 7 came out, they said we're cutting it off here. Everything from this point on is canon. You
And
know.
what else? What I'll say about that is because I said I liked the EU. I understand why they cut it. I understand because at one point it got so like big and it was hard to contain, and they would have to retcon things, and all of it was fighting that.
Well, I mean, they'd have to do what Marvel's doing with its characters.
And it would be much easier just to cut that and start new, which, you know, and maybe keeping some stuff, like for the Rebels show, we're bringing Admiral Thrawn. It's like a friggin' Canadian accent, can't pronounce TH. Admiral Thrawn. Okay, so the blue guy, he was
Okay.
from Heir to the Empire, and that was one of the books that really started it all, the Heir to the Empire. I don't know if you ever read that. That was like one of the biggest expanded universe books that really started us up. And I'll give J.J. Abrams that I do like that he did start his own kind of expanded stuff. Even if it's taken from the original, what he did was decent with expanding it, you know, with replacing the EU, despite not really giving too much background on the stuff like the difference between the New Republic, the First Order, the Resistance.
Well,
all
I
that
mean,
kind
yeah,
of stuff.
there's definitely a look between the First Order and the First Republic, and they made that clear.
Yeah, he did. I just maybe I
all the
fell
while.
asleep, or maybe I wasn't paying attention, or no, I didn't fall asleep during film. I just, you know, I wasn't paying. No, I wasn't paying attention. Maybe it passed through me or something, because you know it was IMAX, but I did not understand. Like, you know, when they blew up. A spoiler alert or whatever. When they blew up the planet of the New Republic capital, I'm like, all right, who are these people? What is this? I have no idea what's going on.
Yeah, I
there's a deleted
agree. That
scene.
sort of came out of. Yeah.
If it was longer, I would like that.
It flows right through you. It surrounds you.
So, no, for little
It's the force.
Binds the
bacteria,
galaxy together.
For little bacteria that gives me special
Well,
power.
I mean, that's what was great about the Clone Wars. It kind of brought the prequels together because I mean,
Yeah.
if you watch them, they're really kind of they don't really embody anything. You just tell what happened is in this movie and then nothing, and then
Okay,
there's no connectivity issue between the three movies.
let's take this all back. Let's circle back. Let's leave the expanded universe aside and get back to the characters of Force Awakens. I think it was weak on characterization. Now, like I said, I did like that they had a female character, a good female character. But to me, just having a female character for the sake of having a female character isn't enough to say that's a great film. Like, I think it was really done well with Mad Max Fury Road. But in this, it's kind of like...
Well, she's still learning.
I didn't like her character in that she goes, to me, Jedi are like samurai, you know, and it takes years and years of training and all of that. Luke goes, Rey goes from knowing nothing to like mastering the Force in one film, as far as it took Luke 3 films to get,
Yeah,
that,
absolutely,
That
yeah.
kind of bothers me. Also, at one point, what's the stormtrooper guy's name?
Oh, Finn.
Finn picks up a
Poe and Finn
lightsaber
are
and
great.
starts fighting
Kylo.
And Kylo's actually had some Jedi training. And it's like, to me, that would be like a standard peasant pikeman or something like that in feudal Japan, picking up a katana and trying to fight a samurai with it.
I didn't look at it like that.
Which is
I mean,
incorrect, yeah.
Decapitated in 2 seconds, you know?
The funny thing was earlier in the film when he fought the riot, stormtrooper who had the melee
spinners.
thing. Yeah, he beat the stormtrooper beat him, and then Finn beat Kylo Ren. So that stormtrooper was more powerful than Kylo Ren.
And so
That's
that
so
I had a problem
funny.
with. And then Kylo Ren, the character of Kylo Ren,
Oh, man.
to me is like, again, such a weak copy of Darth Vader. Okay, so he dresses all in black. There's no reason for him to have a voice modification. Like
Well, absolutely not.
Vader needed it. It was keeping him alive.
Yeah, his face was all messed up, and Kylo Ren wasn't.
Well, I
Because
think-
it makes
well,
him a cooler villain.
Yeah, I think he was starting to know. I think he was compensating because he, it's like, if you love your grandfather, look up to him. I don't think you have his, crushed skull or something in a little box. So he really was like obsessed with Vader, despite everyone hating. He was like, well, I don't know if he was. Like this guy was, well, I guess Palpatine would be the Hitler of a Star Wars thing, but like, this guy who's named Darth Vader and puts fear in everyone, and they beat him. And so he grew up his whole life with everyone hating on the guy because he was such, he was an oppressor. And then somehow he still ends up looking up to him to the point where he keeps his mangled body, or not his full body, his mangled his memorabilia, and he looks up to the guy to the point where he kills a bunch of other children just like he did. So he's so obsessed with a guy that I think it kind of makes sense that he imitates him by having the helmet and the voice changer. I mean, he's not intimidating by himself.
No, he's like a mopey goth kid.
Which is why he had the thing to make up for that. To make up for that.
Well, no, absolutely. He is a movie goth
He's a
kid.
mopey goth kid with a lightsaber.
Yeah,
know?
not only that. I mean, he just.
Yeah.
And Snoke's is the end of the film, and we're going to go fix him and complete his training. It's like he didn't really earn the mask until the end of the film.
Right.
After Rey's kicked his ass.
Yeah. So, so that was definitely
Yeah, that's funny.
a problem, I thought, with this film. But I don't know. Does anyone have anything else they want to?
When I saw it, I'm not the biggest Star Wars fan. When as young as I could be to understand it, my dad gave me the VHS tapes that he'd recorded, on his TV when he was in college in the 70s or whenever. And so I grew up watching those and I loved those. And then the teenage years, I remember watching the Phantom Menace and all those and sort of being like, they're not as excited about it. So this one I was like, new start. I think it could be really cool. So I thought it was a really entertaining movie, but thinking about it from your guys' point of views, I haven't really thought about before, and you have some valid points that make me think about it, but I'm looking forward to the next one, and Rogue One looks really good. I like how we have all this technology now to make these just exciting to watch on the big screen, and that's what I'm taking away from them now. And
Well, they bring it back.
So-
Well, my initial point was, and I say it takes some magic away from, the original A New Hope, was that, when Luke and Obi-Wan are sitting in his, hut or whatever in Tatooine, and he's giving him his father's lightsaber and telling him, oh, your father didn't want me to have this because he thought you and I'd go run off on some damn fool crusade, it speaks to the films of that time, while also being its own unique.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And I'm one of the few people that actually predicted that Vader was Luke's father. I actually predicted that before it had happened.
Vader means father
before
in
the
Dutch,
reveal.
I think, too.
But I think that just those original movies laid things out in a very methodical pace,
Yeah.
whereas in Force Awakens, Rey is using the Jedi mind trick partway through the film.
We're
Where
45 minutes in, yeah.
Yeah, has not trained under a master. Luke had two masters, in the time,
And he barely was able to hold his.
and he didn't do the Jedi mind trick until the third film.
it's also, filmmaking in general is way more sped up these days for these big blockbuster films. They want to.
The expectation is there,
Yeah, and the craft that was put into the old Star Wars, Lucas's vision and all that,
Yeah.
it's going to be a little bit different this time around. So playing it safe, putting a lot of stuff in there, that's sort of.
I mean, and Abrams is a good director. Don't get me wrong.
Oh yeah,
He
well,
is-
he's one of my favorites.
He is phenomenal, but I mean, I would like Vincent said earlier on, I'd like to see him do something new for once. He's the reboot king.
I think that
Super 8.
that he regurgitates very well, because really, when I look at screenwriting, this movie is a beat for beat remake of New Hope. Basically, you have
I agree
you
with you,
have a orphan on a planet who has the Force, and how did the rebels become, like, they won? How did they become rebels again? Suddenly, like, the Empire lost. So I thought that was kind of weird that suddenly, like, it's only how many years later? 50 years later?
30 years
Thir-
later.
30
Almost
years
30.
later. It's 30 years later, and suddenly
We
they-
have a resistance. It's
they're,
here.
they're the
Yeah.
resistance again.
I had to
Yeah, it's
I
a
had
bit
to
ridiculous.
Wikipedia that because there's a Star Wars wiki called Wikipedia, and so they they release the materials like books and stuff, and they give an explanation for it. It was something like the rebels couldn't completely defeat the Empire, so they had some kind of Cold War truce kind of thing, and so the New Republic couldn't fight them full on, so they funded the resistance. So it's kind of like a proxy thing. I mean, it
Well,
was-
the new order, is that what they're called?
New
The
Order,
Yeah.
yeah.
They're just another version of the Nazis. There's the help me Obi-Wan Kenobi hologram, except for this time it's part of the map,
Well, yeah.
And
the
instead of
map is in the message.
instead
so to
of the
speak,
instead of the plans for the Death Star, there's that. Then they go to another planet. There's the cantina. There's the escape and
It's
the Millennium
it's
Falcon.
beat for
There's-
beat, but it was fun. I think it's just fun to watch. Yeah.
Oh, it was, yeah.
If you want to
No-
dive
no
really
one's-
deep into it, it's,
But and so that's kind of where I'm like,
I'm gonna leave here not like Star Wars
no,
movie.
No, please.
I'm not trying to convince you otherwise, but it's just kind of like,
It's like, oh.
well, also think of like, our cars don't even look the same 30 years later, but the X-Wing fighters, like, look, that their high technology looks exactly the same. Their droids look exactly the same 30 years
Well, I mean,
later.
yeah, BB-8's the only real droid that's any different. I mean,
And
It was
he
Star
looks
Wars
a
with a
lot
fresh
like,
coat of
like,
paint. That's what it
like an
what it
R2
was.
unit in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I guess. Well, I was just saying.
Sorry.
I said it's the way it's being described as a fresh coat of paint. But I'd like to see them go to some new places in the next movie. I don't know what could possibly happen. I mean, yeah, they're probably gonna have the conversation on the cliff. I wonder whether he knows.
I
It'll be
will
exciting.
admit this. I think some of the reason why I was more critical of it was the absolute hype from people that I knew, that I knew at not at work, at school and such, who were like either not that I'm judging Star Wars fans, but who weren't into Star Wars or just casual. When my whole life was like you brought up, and it was just overhyped. And I saw it and I liked it. And if it wasn't everyone's like, oh, this is so new, this is so amazing, this is so everything. If people were just like, well, maybe that's, they have to because of publicity, but my reason why I might be more hostile is just because of I thought it was undeserved hype. I still liked it. I mean, I don't regret seeing it, but I just think it didn't live up to its hype. But I still liked it.
See, what you say, that exact spiel you just made about it not living up to the hype and everything, that is what I experienced with Phantom Menace. Like, I had grown up
Yeah.
on the Star Wars. Star Wars came out when I was 7. Empire came out when I was 10. Jedi came out when I was 13. So that was like, bam, for me. And then I had to wait until my 20s, for them to come out with another film. And so I was way ready for it. I skipped work to go there, and my sister came, all of my friends came.
Did you dress up?
I didn't dress up, but I did wait in line, and we were there, we were camped out, and we called in sick to work, all of us, and then the news showed up, and my sister was joking about oh, look at all these people that their bosses are gonna see them on the news, and then it was us,
so it was kind of like how my going to see Avengers for the first time was for me,
Yeah.
'Cause that was kind of we had a in college, it was a big deal, and it was essentially new Star Wars, so to speak. We had to pay off guys in line so we can get our tickets.
Yeah. Well,
Oh my
basically, I went through all that, and then I saw the film, and I was so let down because Phantom Menace is a pretty bad film.
It is. But
It doesn't hold up at all today.
Okay, but now I'm in the minority. I liked it because I think I was really young when I saw that, and it was, as I said before, the other ones, and it was good. I still like it just for nostalgia, maybe.
I liked how there was the pod racing on the N64. At least we got that from it. That was a good.
Well, I think that it had a lot of problems. One, those prequels were too kiddie oriented, in my opinion. Now, maybe that I grew up in the, going from my 13 years old to being a 20-year-old and seeing it, I thought they overused CGI that didn't fit with the look of the earlier films. And I felt the character development was really poor. I felt that some of the characters were pretty borderline offensive racial stereotypes. First of all, Jar Jar's just annoying.
That was the reason I've heard as to why his character was included was because the same reason why the Ewoks were, because they put in Ewoks so they could expand to the toy market. And so because not enough girls are buying Star Wars toys, so they said, how do we get girls to make us more money, get Star Wars toys? Oh, we have little teddy bears that are characters.
No,
so
you
Jar Jar
have
Binks,
more girl characters, not more Ewoks.
For Jar Jar Binks, from what I understand it was because it was they needed money in the Caribbean market because the Caribbean market was not doing very well for Star Wars. And if at the point you have to worry about the Caribbean market, I think you're financially sound. But anyway, so they said, well, why don't we have this character who Caribbeans could identify with? And so we put in Jar Jar Banks, and that backfired. As I guess they got what they deserved.
I never heard that story. That's
what I heard.
I've never heard that story either, but whatever. He's a terrible. In addition to being just annoying, he's a terrible racial stereotype. I mean, he's not the only one. The slaver that's got the hook nose. He's kind of like a little, cross between Jewish Italian.
You see the fan theory that like Jar Jar Binks is like.
Oh, Darth Jar Jar.
Like the head of everything.
That has no
so
ground
funny.
whatsoever.
No, I know completely. It's just funny because I don't remember being annoyed by Jar Jar at all.
So when
I saw it in
but
theaters.
when you come from my perspective and you see the original movies, and then
haven't
those
rewatched
movies
it.
are such a letdown. By comparison, Force Awakens, you're like, well, that was pretty good, because my expectations were in the toilet,
I mean, yeah, because you go into it thinking, it's going to be this great film, and then it's, oh, hold on a second,
You went back and saw the other two in theaters, 2 and 3?
Of
Episode 2 and 3?
Have I gone back and watched them since then?
No, like after being so let down from The Phantom Menace.
I did go back and watch all 3 of them in the theaters. But I did not go like opening week, and I waited until it was like second run. I'm like, okay, I don't need to be there for the because I still had the hope that like they would learn from their mistakes and like the second one will be better, or what? So what was the
second one was Attack of the Clones.
Attack of the Clones will be better, and then
Revenge of the Sith.
Revenge of the Sith.
I thought
will
the
be,
Revenge of the
and I
Sith
think
was-
Revenge of the Sith might be a little bit. We're all video editors, and so one of my dream projects, and I'm giving it away, to all the people out there, so everybody's going to hear this. But one of my dream projects, when I get time, would be to go back and edit all 3 of those films into one good film.
Oh, that's been done.
There are a number of fan edits out there where they take certain little elements and they put it together, and it's so much better.
We destroyed Eric's dream.
It's like, why didn't?
Really?
Yeah, why didn't? Why didn't Lucas do that to begin with? If he's going to take his films and re-edit them like he's done numerous times and put different little things in,
Yeah, I think that some of his special editions were worse, and some were better. I think some of the edits he did were actual improvements, but in general, most of them weren't.
What I'll give him is at least everything that he did, it was his. He, because he owned the studio that I'm pretty sure he owned the studio that released it. So he didn't have any studio that say you need to do this to appease the Chinese market or something. You need to do this. It was all his film that he wanted.
You mean the prequels?
Yeah, and so I think even some of the original ones too.
The original ones were 20th Century Fox.
But they gave him a decent amount of control to it, from what I understand, from what I've read. So you have at least he didn't like some. I forget what movie. Some movies you'd say, "What the hell was that?" And it's awful. It's because there was so like that was it. The new Fantastic Four, because it was torn apart by studio and director vision.
Well,
so you have
that is a topic for another day.
You at least have to give George Lucas that it was his film, his vision, and yes, as a filmmaker, you at least have to respect him for that.
I do respect him for that, and I do think he has a greater vision than J.J. Abrams.
Whoa.
Abrams, like I said,
Do you
he's
think Lucas has a better vision?
I do, and he held his tongue about the he wasn't saying a lot. I did see where he said something where he would have, it's their thing now and they can do whatever they want with it. He would have, pushed a new story, which I think is his way of saying they remade, New
I'll
Hope.
make the judgment after they're all out. That's sort of like where I feel that's all.
They'll never all be out.
You don't think they'll have? He's not going to do 3.
Star Wars 20, the search for
I
even
think
more
they're
money.
going to continue to make them every few years.
Well, I mean, it's like we're getting the one shot here with Rogue One. It's
Is J.J. Abrams directing 8 and 9?
I have no idea.
Yeah, I don't know.
No, it's in episode 8 is Ryan
producing,
Johnson, and I forget who's doing 9.
I thought
They
it was
announced
his
who it
choice.
Was it
was.
Gareth? No, it's not.
Gareth Edwards is doing Rogue
he's
One,
only doing
I
which is
retract
the
my statements then. I
He's
thought it was
producing
his
them
trilogy.
all. I think he's producing. I think he is producing all of them, right?
We had a light go down.
Like, oh,
Are they trying to tell us something? Are we going on too long? So our esteemed producer Dylan back there, I need you to look up what the film that inspired the dogfights and trench sequences in Star Wars was. It was something 21. And it was a World War II film. But speaking of
sure
that,
he's in there. I thought I saw him walk out at one point.
I'm not sure. But speaking of the Death Star and trench warfare and all that stuff, how is it that you're going to spend billions of dollars building the super weapon, and in Force Awakens, it's Death Star 2.0. It really is just a really big Death Star, which
physically impossible for
how many times how many times are they going to build that one little flaw into it that blows the whole thing up? Like all you have to do is fly down and shoot it. It's
Not
like
only that, but Rogue One its whole premise is based upon just that, getting the plans to that exhaust port so we can blow it up.
Rogue One is linked to the Force Awakens. I
No,
don't
not
read
the Force
much on them, I
Awakens.
just
It's
see them.
episode. It's linked to episode 4. Because Vader, they announced the other day he's going to show up in it. So
But really, Anakin invented that move, and then he goes to build a Death Star that his own son blows up the same way, which he should have known better. And then they go and they build more Death Stars in the later
that was kind
Empire
of-
and stuff like that. And it's like you already knew that it could be blown up by this little exhaust
how do we know
port.
that wasn't Palpatine's idea?
Well,
For the insurance, yeah, it was an inside job.
and then so then the New Order's like, oh, well, we're going to build this uber weapon. It's even bigger than the
Yeah, what
original
the hell-
Death Star,
what the
but we're going to
hell-
put the same
What the
exact
hell did they
exhaust
call
port.
it in this film?
What?
What the hell did they call it in The Force Awakens?
Oh, the Star
Killer-
Base.
Star Killer
Oh,
Base.
Star Killer
Star
Base.
Killer Base.
I
Okay.
think, I don't know why I'm defending them, but I think is that the Death Star was so big that you couldn't find that on its own. That they counted on that no one would know how to, no one would know how to build it, and so that's why they had to get the intelligence thing. That they, maybe the question should be that the intelligence should have been more guarded. But that's what we have for Rogue One to find out, because that was the kind of thing. Nothing is completely impenetrable. But and people say, "Oh, that was stupid, the little thing." Well, yeah, but are you going to go and survey the entire Death Star, because a thing that's the size of a moon, just to find this 1 2 meter shaft that you wouldn't have known otherwise?
If the thing's going to blow up your planet, yes.
Okay, right. Well, okay.
Well, the whole idea behind Rogue One is that it is, there's the line in one of these movies that says we lost a lot of both in spies for this.
Yeah.
So I mean,
A
that
lot
it
of
alone in that one little log line is a whole other adventure.
I think, I think they could do a lot more with the Star Wars universe if they got away from the Skywalker family. Because there's a lot more stuff
Which is
you could tell.
which we don't know for sure until Episode 8 drops.
I think even Lucas said that before The Force Awakens was even in production, he said that 1 through 6 was done with the Skywalker family, and he might, because it's like a soap opera of that family, and I think, if I remember, he said he might have done it with the grandchildren for 7, 8, 9, but he wasn't sure. This was before Disney bought out the Star Wars franchise, so he was along the same lines of thinking, from what I recall.